we realize that we're, living in a world filled with many beings. And so some of them are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Arhats, lineage lamas, people who really want to help us. And other beings are sentient beings like us who, well, you know what sentient beings are like. Yeah. You love them and they drive you crazy. No, I'm joking. Well, maybe not. But just ordinary beings want happiness, don't want suffering, and don't know what the causes of those two are, and so don't know what to practice and abandon. Yeah. And, some people have the idea that you are a spiritual practitioner, so, you find your local cave, that's very secluded and distant and far away where you don't have to deal with anybody except you want it with central heating and aircon in the summer and a refrigerator and everything else that makes it comfortable. So we think that, we just have to get away from everybody. And it's not that. It's learning how to be at home with ourselves, no matter where we are, and how to have an open, compassionate heart with all beings whenever we encounter them. Yeah, because we can get away from the objects or people that we don't like if we're physically away from them, but mentally we are still controlled. Yeah, because then we live our life of how can I get away from this that is distracting or bothers me or whatever. And so what it boils down to is, freedom isn't just to go where you want. Yeah, freedom is something that happens in your own heart when we're free from ignorance, anger, and attachment. Yeah, because all of our afflicted emotions, come with us wherever we go. And there's, it would be so nice if they needed their own passports. And so you could go to another country and your afflictions got rejected. They couldn't come with you. That would be so nice, wouldn't it? Yeah, but unfortunately, our anger and jealousy and greed and pride, they all just come right along with. Yeah, and so it's not, a spiritual practice is not a thing of avoiding stuff, because then, like I said, it controls us. We still live our life in relationship to those fears, to whatever it is we don't like, to whatever it is we crave, and our mind isn't free. So that's, when you think about what freedom is, it's not the 14th Amendment. Or no, I'm sorry, it's not the Second Amendment. And I think to some extent, maybe not even the First Amendment. That might do with some modifying, at least on our own part. Yeah, legally, we may say anything we want to, but as spiritual practitioners, we monitor our own mind. Yeah, we monitor our motivation before we speak. So you might have a legal freedom. You can cuss anybody out you want to, but that doesn't make your mind free. Because we're still controlled by those afflictive conceptions and thoughts that make us do harmful and painful things to other living beings that at the same time harm us. So this is the tangled mess that we want to undo. Okay? Do you think your mind is a tangled mess? A couple of people do. You think your mind is clean, clear, logical, rational? Yeah. When you look at what you think and how you respond to certain things, I don't know about you, but my mind can be completely irrational. Yeah. Have you ever, years after you've done something, looked back and said, what in the world did I do that for? Yeah. Like, was I out of my mind that I thought that or did that? Well, yeah, probably. That just means the afflictions overpowered us. Okay, so, when we talk about mindfulness, it's not just, sitting back and letting your mind entertain you while you listen to music and see beautiful, tranquil pictures. It's actually paying attention to what's going on in your mind, being mindful of your precepts, being mindful of your values. Yeah. And then with introspective awareness, monitoring the mind and trying to bring our thoughts and actions in harmony with our values. Yeah. Because we have great values, don't we? Yeah. And our values are terrific until a situation comes where the self-centered mind can get something it wouldn't normally get. And then values out the window, justified, rationalized, defended, excused, suppressed, repressed, who knows what. Yeah. So this is the kind of mess we want to clean up. Okay, so we visualize the merit field, yeah, and realize that there's a lot of beings who want to help us do this and who have practiced the path before us. And through their own practice and their own inner transformation, they show examples of people who have done what we want to do. So that helps us know that this path works, that if we follow it, if we pay attention to it and follow it correctly, yeah, that we can attain the same kind of results that the figures in the merit field have attained. And so that gives us some feeling of support. And then visualizing the sentient beings around us, really helps us to remember that we've been the recipient of tremendous kindness in our lives. And through our spiritual practice, we want to repay that kindness, by improving the state of our mind and our body and our speech, and doing the work on the cushion, and then also being of direct benefit to others when the opportunity is there. Okay, so then, we have our work cut out. And people go, what am I going to do with my life? This. Yeah? Yeah. Why not try and transform yourself into the kind of person that you want to be so that you're consistent with your own values? That's a good thing to do with your life. And the thing is, if you do that, that can come with you to the next life. All the money, all the diplomas, all the awards, all of that stuff stays here when we die. Yeah, can't take any of it with us. But yeah, the karma we create and the new imprints we put on our mind from changing our behavior, that will come with us. Mm-hmm. So good to make preparation for that. So once again, let's place what we're about to do very firmly within the context of being of benefit to all living beings. And if we wonder, well, how can sitting here listening to a talk benefit all sentient beings? I should be out doing something. Then reflect how anybody who is able to serve others well or benefit others directly needs to be prepared, needs to work on themselves, needs to develop good qualities and knowledge within themselves. Otherwise, just the intention to benefit becomes the blind leading the blind. So by listening to Dharma teachings, reflecting on them, meditating on them, then we are slowly able to progress along the path. And as we do, our compassion and our wisdom increase. And then the direct benefit from to other living beings increases. But still we maintain as our motivation the ultimate goal of full awakening, which gives us a direction of where we're going in our lives. So we left off with verse 7. We are rushing through this text. So, propelled by karma and habituated to afflictions, the sufferings of all beings who share this same nature, I will heap them upon myself, upon the self that yearns for my own selfish happiness. Okay? So yesterday we began talking about the Tonglan, taking and giving meditation, and we'll develop that further today. So attachment and anger are our dear companions. Ignorance is the friend that never leaves us. Yeah. We always want friends and companions that are reliable, that won't abandon us. Yeah, well, the three poisonous attitudes, really, they hang out, ignorance, anger, and attachment. They're never going to walk out on us and leave us high and dry. Yeah, they're always going to be there. Uh-oh. Yeah. Uh-oh. We are so habituated to afflictions that we often do not realize when they take over our minds. We hear a critical remark, feel offended, and get angry. It all seems so natural, doesn't it? That's what we've always done. That's what everybody does. Yeah? If somebody criticizes you and you don't get angry and you don't defend yourself, what's wrong with you? Yeah? If there's something you really crave and you don't work really hard to find some way to get it, then what's wrong with you? You're not acting like everybody else does. Okay? So we, have so much training in doing things the way everybody else does that we just naturally go along. We take it for granted that the right response is to utter a snide remark in return or spread bad tales about our offender. Right? Yeah, somebody insults us. Yeah, we got to do something. So some of us are very perfected in sarcasm. So the others of us are very snide. Others of us manipulate by breaking down in tears. Others of us explode and stomp out. We have all different sorts of ways, of reacting. But we've never tried calming our mind down first. Yeah. And we just, whatever pops in our mind, that's what comes out of our mouth, and that's what we do. Yeah? Unless we sit and ruminate about it. What's the best way for me to get even? How can I say the remark that is really going to stick it to them where it hurts? So in this way, we plant the seeds of destructive karma in our mind streams. This karma will ripen as the type of rebirth we will take in the future. It will influence whether we will be healthy or sick, whether we live in a war-torn or peaceful place, and whether people like us or not. Okay, so we're creating now the causes for our future rebirths and what we experience during those rebirths. Okay. So it's all about, in Buddhism and in life in general, it's all about creating the causes. We sometimes wait until the situation is there, and then we think, how do I improve it? Yeah. It's like your garden is already full of weeds, and then you think, how can I plant beautiful plants in it? Well, the time for planting the beautiful plants is in the springtime before the weeds grow. Yeah, and when the weeds start to grow, you mow them down. You do something about them. Okay, but we kind of sometimes wait until it's already a big mess, and then we begin to think about what to do. And the thing here about karma that's very important is because we often think harm to others and harm to me are two different things, And if others harm me, I have to defend myself from harm. Okay, and if I harm others, the harm is just to them. My harming others does not harm me. Okay, so we go, I got even. But what we don't realize is with the law of karma and its effects, every time we harm others, we're harming ourselves. And every time we harm ourselves, we're harming others, or at least letting others down. So it isn't a thing of either or. Yeah, it's when we harm or when others harm us, both parties are harmed. Okay, they're harmed in different ways. Yeah? If I harm somebody, by telling them off and really disparaging them, okay, they have the direct harm that they feel from the power of my nasty words. But at the same time, I'm creating the the non-virtuous action of harsh speech, of malicious speech. So it looks like I'm the one harming them, but I'm at the same time putting the seeds of malicious speech on my own mind stream. And those seeds will ripen at a later time to, it could ripen in my rebirth, what rebirth I'm born in what environment I find myself living in my habitual habits, and also how other people treat me, what happens to me. So the idea is when we do something with a harmful intention or a harmful action, it directly harms the other person, but it harms me too. Only I experience the harmful result, usually a little later on. Sometimes we experience harmful results in this lifetime. They may be the karmic result of our action, but they may be the karmic result of a previous action. Okay? Because, if you go out and shoot somebody, you go to jail. So that's a result that you experience, hopefully, soon, before you can harm other people. But the real harm is putting the seed of non-virtue in my own mind, which then will ripen in, various ways in the future, and limit my ability to practice the path, as well as result in quite a miserable life. Okay, so when one person harms another, both people are being harmed. The harmer harms the other person directly. They harm themselves through planting the seed of non-virtue in their own mind. Okay? So that's important to remember, because sometimes it's like we're really mad and we want to really get even with somebody. And then, if you stop and say, okay, well, I think I'm going to derive so much pleasure by getting even. But that's going to result in, a bad rebirth, and even when I'm born human, a lot of negative events. So is the pleasure I'm deriving from, harming somebody directly now, is that worth all the future suffering I'm going to experience because of it? Well, clearly the answer is no. And then you start to think, well, why do I want to harm this other person to start with? And why do I think that harming somebody else is going to give me pleasure? What kind of person am I that derives pleasure from harming other people? And so then that instigates a whole deeper reflection in our own mind that helps us understand how our mind works and begin to relinquish these kind of vengeful thoughts. Is that making sense to you in some way? It's a different way of looking at things, but it's still based on cause and effect, which is a principle of how we run our lives anyway. Okay, it's just we need to we're often confused about what causes lead to what effects. And so this is helping us to become, to fine-tune that thing of cause and effect. When I do this, what kind of effect does it bring? So we're going to get into lots of that. Okay, I just have to not talk so much and read more. But I think I hope the talking helps. Okay. Okay, so before we engage in actions, we have a choice to create the causes for suffering or for happiness. But after we create destructive karma, unless we purify it, it will definitely ripen in unpleasant ways. We need to contemplate this and recognize that this is our situation. This will prompt us to generate strong aspiration to free ourselves from cyclic existence. Then, realizing that this is the situation of all other sentient beings, okay, so that's the second line in the verse, the sufferings of all beings who share this same nature. We generate the wish for them to be free of cyclic existence. Recognizing that our self-centeredness is the real enemy responsible for all of our suffering, we imagine taking the misery of others away from them and heaping it upon our own self-centered thought, okay, which is the self that yearns for only my own happiness. Okay, usually, in our usual way of behaving, if there's a problem, that's when we practice generosity and we give the problem to other people. Yeah, I am giving you a problem freely. There's no obligation to return it. Yeah. So if there's a problem, it's yours. Yeah. If there's something good, I'll take it. Yeah. So here we're reversing that. Yeah. And it's not done in a masochistic way. We are not trying to make ourselves suffer. This is quite important. Yeah. I mean, misery comes quite naturally, even we try and avoid it. So there's absolutely no purpose in making ourselves suffer. It doesn't making ourselves suffer does not purify our negative karma. It doesn't do anything to benefit us. Okay? And again, this is something that I think we need to contemplate deeply, because the culture we grew up in, when you have a theistic religion behind you, you know, it seems, at least my experience, is that we have the idea that the more I suffer, the more I am being absolved of whatever harmful action I have done. Okay? It's very easy to see where that comes from, isn't it? Yeah. But is it true that the worse I feel, the more I feel guilty, the more I tell myself what a lousy person I am for doing X, Y, and Z, yeah, the more I am atoning for my sin. Yeah, that's an underlying message we often pick up. Is that true? Okay, we've been taught many things that are not true. Is it true that the more we feel guilty, the more we hate ourselves, the more we're purifying? From a Buddhist viewpoint, the answer is definitely no. Okay? In Buddhism, when we want to purify, we practice the four opponent powers. Yeah. And one of them is not hating, not hating ourselves. Okay? So with the four opponent powers, we have regret, not guilt. Okay? From a Buddhist viewpoint, guilt is an affliction to be eliminated. Yeah. Why? Because guilt is totally distorted. Yeah. If we look at what is going on in our mind when we feel guilty, is it realistic? Look what I did. What an awful person I am. How could I have done that? I don't want anybody else to know, because then they'll know what a horrible person I am. They'll never forgive me. Anyway, I can never forgive myself. I feel so awful, beat myself up. Okay. And then we think that that's going to purify the negativity. It doesn't. Yeah. We're just digging ourselves into a hole and jumping in. Okay. If we want to purify our negativity, we have to change our attitude. Okay. So that's the second part of the four opponent powers. The first part was regret, but not guilt. The second part is, I call it restoring the relationship. The official name is the power of reliance. The idea is that we are relying on whoever we harmed, and we transform our attitude towards those beings. And by transforming our attitude, that helps us to purify. And we're restoring our relationship with them by developing a good attitude instead of the negative one with which we did something harmful. Okay? So, if I harmed holy beings, then I take refuge in them. That changes my attitude and way of relating to them. If I harmed other sentient beings, due to my anger or jealousy or greed, then I generate bodhicitta towards them, and that transforms the whole way I relate to them. Okay? So it isn't just sitting there like, I'm still angry at them, and part of me is really glad I did that, but I also feel terrible about doing that. And our mind just becomes a tangled up mess. Okay, so here we're quite clear, I did something that I regret. Yeah, and I am not going to defend it and justify it. I regret it. Yeah, and I'm going to change my attitude towards whoever it was that I harmed. Yeah. Then the third is I do some kind of remedial action. Yeah. So it could be like the practices we do here when we do prostrations in the morning, when we recite mantras and being generous and meditating on bodhicitta. It also involves volunteering, when we do volunteer service in the community, or you volunteer at a monastery or a dharma center, that is a remedial action. We're doing something useful that's going to benefit sentient beings. And then the fourth of the four opponent powers is making a resolve not to do the action again, or if we can't truthfully say we'll never do it again, at least set ourselves a time period that we won't do it. Because some things like gossip, if you say, I will never gossip again, yeah, then are you being truthful or are you lying? Yeah? If you know yourself well and you'll probably gossip again, then set a time frame and say, okay, for the next 3 days, I will really watch my speech, or in the next 3 weeks, or whatever it is. You set yourself some realistic time and then do that. Okay? So when we imagine taking the suffering of others upon ourselves, again, we're not deliberately trying to make ourselves suffer. Yeah. In fact, one of the most of the purification practices that we do involve generating a feeling of well-being or a feeling of bliss. Yeah. We think making ourselves feel terrible is what purifies us. Buddhism says, generating a feeling of internal peace or internal bliss is what comes from purification, or what helps purification. Okay, so when you do the Vajrasattva sadhana, or when you're bowing to the 35 Buddhas, you're imagining light coming in from the holy beings into you. And the light comes in and it, makes you imagine that it flushes out all the negativity. Yeah? And then that your whole body-mind complex is filled with very blissful light. Yeah. So that makes you want to purify. Whereas if we say purification is, oh, I'm so lousy, I'm so terrible. Yeah. Yeah. How many people were brought up that feeling guilty was good? You should feel guilty. Yeah. I once led a retreat, and we were talking about the 4 powers, and we divided into 3 discussion groups. Okay, the Jews, the Protestants, and the Catholics. And as we were discussing guilt versus regret, we had a little contest of, who can feel the guiltiest. Yeah. So guess who won? It was actually a tie. It was actually, but I think I know. My team was the one, but we were really gracious to the other side. And said that, yes, they feel just as guilty as we do, but, I think my side actually was the guiltier one. Okay, so, yeah, and it was really interesting to see, how that conditioning that we received when we were very, very young influences what we think today, and how sometimes we get very stuck in our minds. And the good thing about being an adult is that now we can reflect on the things that we learned as kids and make up our own minds whether we believe them or not, whether they're true or not, whether they're helpful or not. And if they're not true and they're not helpful, we leave them aside. Yeah, and we develop, beliefs that are true and that are beneficial. Okay, but this requires, a lot of deep reflection inside of ourselves. And this isn't something quick, cheap, and easy, which is how we like things to be nowadays. Quick, at least quick and easy. Sometimes, okay, we'll pay a little bit. It doesn't have to be totally cheap. But if it is, quick, cheap, and easy is the best. If it isn't, at least quick and easy. Yeah. So let me do this whole paragraph together again. So we need to contemplate this whole thing about karma, and recognize that this is our situation. Yeah, that our own mind is creating our happiness and misery. This will prompt us to generate a strong aspiration to free ourselves from cyclic existence. Then, realizing that this is the situation of all other sentient beings, we generate the wish for them to be free of cyclic existence. Recognizing that our self-centeredness is the real enemy responsible for all of our suffering, we imagine taking the misery of others away from them and heaping it upon our self-centered thought, the self that yearns for only my own happiness. Okay, so it's explaining step by step how to do this. Mentally taking on others' suffering does not mean that we blame ourselves for being selfish and thus think that we deserve to suffer. Yeah? How often do we say, I deserve to suffer? Yeah. And what is this new age? Well, it was new age several years ago. Maybe it isn't big so now. But telling people that you have cancer because you're so angry. Yeah. Telling people that they are physically ill and they're causing it themselves by their own minds. Yeah. That's a little bit cruel, don't you think? Yeah. And who are we to diagnose the cause of somebody's cancer? And who are we, to tell them, see, you got sick because of your anger. You better do something with your anger. Okay, that's not very compassionate. Because what we're trying to do when we say such thing is then the other person feels guilty. Why am I sick? Because I have so much anger, and that makes me a bad person, and so my sickness is a punishment for my being bad. Yeah. If you ever do hospice training, yeah, one of the things you hear is that some people feel that when they are dying, they're being punished by God. Yeah, that death is a punishment. In Buddhism, death is the natural result of being born. There's no ethical judgment on it. When you're born, it's definite you're going to die. There's no punishment and reward involved in any of that. We create the cause, we experience the result. Okay. So mentally taking on others' suffering does not mean that we blame ourselves for being selfish and thus think we deserve to suffer. Rather, differentiating between the inherently existent self that the self-grasping ignorance and self-centered thought grasp, and between that inherently existent self, which, by the way, doesn't exist at all, but we believe exists, and the conventional self, which does exist. Okay, so if we can differentiate those, we want to free ourselves from the tyranny of the self-centeredness and the ignorance, yeah, which are based on the big conspiracy theory of ignorance. Okay? Conspiracy theories, yeah, that's what we really talk about these days. Well, this is the biggest conspiracy theory, yeah. The part of ourselves that thinks that there is a real, independent, inherently existent me there that does not depend on anything else. Yeah? And that at least should be able to control my body and mind, as well as other people and the weather. I want to control everything. But if you look, what's the feeling of I then? There's this very strong feeling, an independent me. Yeah. And then you have to check, is that the way I exist? Yeah. We do exist. We're all sitting here in this room. But do we exist as some kind of independent entity that doesn't depend on anything else? Do we exist without being caused? Do you ever reflect that you are an entity that exists only because of causes? Yeah. Most of us don't reflect on that. Maybe some people do. but to reflect, I exist only because of the causes that preceded me. I don't exist by myself. I didn't cause myself to exist. Causes come before results. So if I exist, there were causes. And if the causes had been different, or if the conditions had been different, I wouldn't exist the way I am now. Okay? And then part of your mind goes, but. I'm me. Yeah, do you have that part of you that says, I'm me. Definitely me. As if we were not dependent on causes and conditions. As if we willed ourselves into existence. Yeah, and appeared, poof, out of nothing, out of nowhere. Yeah. But no, there's a long history of causes behind who we are today, and even the fact that we exist the way we do. Okay. So the self exists, but the dependent self exists, but the independent, inherently existent one, yeah, is fake news. Yeah, it's totally fake. Yeah. So the moral of that is don't believe everything you think. Yeah. Just as with regular conspiracy theories and fake news, you analyze and see if it's true. Yeah. When we're grasping at an inherently existent self, we have to analyze and see if there, is that how we actually exist or not? Or if we're operating out of self-centeredness and, I'm the most important, then to stop and analyze, is that true? Okay. So instead of believing everything we think, because a lot of what we think is really dumb, it's really nonsensical, then we reflect and make up, as His Holiness Dalai Lama is always advising us to do, we analyze and we use logic. Yeah? And then we can trust what we believe in rather than just, well, I feel it. Yeah, I feel it. Well, that's great. I don't know about you, but I can feel a lot of different things. And, and my feelings about something can change like this. Can your feelings about somebody or something change very quickly? So if I just I feel like it, or how we go around saying, I don't feel like it. You want me to vacuum the floor? Well, I don't feel like it. Yeah. What does I don't feel like it mean? Yeah. What is lying behind I don't feel like it? Yeah, there's the belief in an inherently existent self, that who is more important than everybody else, that who at that time has aversion to some ethically neutral or even virtuous action. And that prompts the words, I don't feel like it, which means get off my back. I'm not going to do it. Yeah, because I want to go and meditate on compassion for the world. Okay. So these are the kinds of things, to apply our logic and reasoning to, Yeah. And this is how we bring in, like, all the things we learn in the Lam Rim. This is how we bring in the 4 establishments of mindfulness. This is how we bring in the thought training teachings, or the teachings on emptiness, or the teachings on equalizing and exchanging self with others. All these things apply to what is going on in our lives. So we have to bring these things in. They are not intellectual ideas that we play with and then, do whatever we want. We think about these things so that they have a positive effect on us. Okay. So the conventional self is the I that exists by being merely designated, independence on the body and mind. That is, on the basis of seeing the body and mind, or just on the basis of the body and mind, we don't have to see them with our eyes, we say I or person. This is the mere I, the conventionally existent I, that revolves in cyclic existence, practices the Dharma, and attains awakening. That merely designated self, which cannot be found when searched for, when we search for exactly what it is. It exists, but when we search for exactly what it is, we can't isolate something. But it still exists. It exists now, and it continues into the awakened state. The problem occurs when ignorance grasps that I in an erroneous manner, projecting a mode of existence onto it that it doesn't have. Okay? So here's the conventionally existent I that is dependent, and we take, our ideas of inherent existence, or being a self-enclosed entity, or being the chief controller, whatever it is, and we superimpose it on that merely designated I. Giving it, or trying to give it some nature of solidity that actually it doesn't have. And when we feel like, there's really me, there's some kind, it's very interesting to observe, there's some feeling of security. I think that's why anger can be so attractive, because when we're upset, it could be anger upset, it could be we're not getting what we want upset, dissatisfaction upset, whatever it is. When, that upset comes, and of course it's helped by adrenaline, then the feeling of I is so strong. I am being cheated. I want this. They're harming me. I have a right to do X, Y, Z. The feeling, notice how that feeling of I arises in those occasions, and we really feel like I exist. Because I feel it. Coming back to this, I feel it. I feel like there's a real me in here, that has these rights and can demand this. And we believe that feeling. And we make up philosophies that validate it. But it's all a conspiracy theory made up by our own ignorance. Okay. And as with any conspiracy theory, the end result is not good. The end result is problems. Okay, so the problem starts when ignorance grasps that I in an erroneous manner, projecting a mode of existence onto it that it doesn't have. Ignorance believes that the conventional self exists in its own right as an objectively existent person with its own inherent nature. That's not how the self actually exists, but ignorance superimposes that. In fact, such an inherently existent self does not exist at all. In short, ignorance makes a big deal about something that doesn't exist. Yeah. And that's the tragedy in the whole thing. Yeah. Is we're making a big deal out of something that doesn't exist in the way we think it does. Yeah. In short, ignorance makes a big deal about something that does not exist. The inherently existent I does not exist. Okay? Ignorance is like a child believing in the boogeyman and becoming paralyzed with fear. The child is afraid of something that doesn't exist. That doesn't mean that the person doesn't exist at all. The person exists conventionally by being merely designated. What doesn't exist is the inherently existent person we mistakenly believe is there. The conventional person wants to be happy and free of suffering. Every person has this thought, and there's nothing wrong with it. Wanting to be happy and free of suffering, that is not a problem. It's when we restrict everything to me thinking we're the most important one and grasping that inherently existent I. That's the problem. But, the sentient being's natural wish, I want to be happy and be free of suffering. Yeah? And I want others to be happy and free of suffering too. Okay. However, ignorance isn't satisfied with that and believes the I to be quite solid. Buoyed by ignorance, self-centeredness says, I want to be happy. I am most important. I should get everything I want. Everyone should like me. No one should criticize me. I may make mistakes, but they aren't very bad in any way. People shouldn't notice them. Okay? Everybody should love me. Okay? That's where we reify the idea of I. That's where the problem comes in. Okay? So ignorance misapprehends the self, and self-preoccupation makes ourself and everything that happens to us more important than they are. Okay? So somebody didn't say good morning to you today. And you go, they didn't say good morning. Oh. And then from there, some people would say, they're very rude, not saying good morning. Don't they have any manners? And another person would say, oh, I must have done something wrong. That's why they didn't say good morning. So simple action, somebody didn't say good morning. Our mind is off and running, developing conspiracy theories. One is the other person's rude and they're obnoxious. The other is, I did something wrong and they don't like me. Yeah? What is the evidence to prove either one of those? The evidence is that the person was busy thinking about something else and walked past us and didn't go, "Good morning, you wonderful person." That's the evidence that somebody else, they're thinking about something else. Or maybe their stomach hurts. Or who knows what's going on in the mind, why they didn't say good morning. Yeah. But we take it so personally. Yeah. This marriage is not going to work out if you don't say good morning to me. Yeah. And then we extrapolate on it. You don't say good morning. You don't say good night. You don't say sweet dreams. You don't say I love you. Yeah. But you criticize me. You're passive aggressive. You need to go to the psychologist. Yeah, something's wrong with you. And then you interpret everything in the marriage through, they don't really love me. They're ignoring me. Da, 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 da. Yeah. Well, what are your expectations? Your expectations are either I'm queen for a day or I'm king for a day. Not for a day, for the rest of my life. Yeah. And my spouse should meet all my needs. And they should forever be in a good mood and be kind to me and praise me. And they can never be in a bad mood. And if I make a mistake, they should never point it out. Yeah, even if my mistake, cost us $10,000, if they don't point it out. They just continually say, I love you, you're wonderful, you're the best person ever alive. Yeah? And actually, that was all written in the marriage contract, that you should act like that. Yeah, and then your spouse says, show me. I want to see where that was written. And then you go, uh-oh. Yeah, uh-oh. Maybe I have the wrong expectation. My spouse is a human being. Just like my parents were human beings. Yeah, we expect other people to be perfect. And what does perfect mean? They do what I want them to do when I want them to do it. That's the definition of perfect. Not that they do what you want them to do when you want them to do it. That's imperfection, unless your idea of perfection coincides with mine. Yeah. So can you begin to see why we have problems? Yeah. And that the problems come from our own afflictions. Just as ignorance is not an intrinsic part of us and can be eliminated, so too the self-centered thought is not who we are, and it can be abandoned. We are not inherently selfish. Some biologist, some scientist is going to give me a dirty look right now. I said we are not inherently selfish. Yeah, because, you have an amygdala. Yeah, and that amygdala is, it's part of your reptilian brain. And you have other parts of your brain and those neurons, and that is what makes you selfish. That is why you treasure your own life more than other people's lives. Yeah, because of those neurons in that part of your brain firing. Yeah. So the compassionate neurons Yeah, they're in some other part of your brain. They're not firing. Yeah. But the ones that say my life is more important than others, that one is an inherent part of us. It is hardwired into our brain. Okay? That's what some people say. Yeah. If that were so, then Buddhahood would be impossible. Because if we are inherently selfish, inherently, taking care of ourselves more than anybody else, and that is not an adventitious part of our brain, of who we are. If it's really hardwired and it goes from life to life, which already is contradictory because we leave our brain behind in this life, and when we go on to the next life, we don't take the same brain, okay? But if we have this idea of an inherently existent thing, and these kinds of things are hardwired, then what to do? Then you can modify them a little bit so you aren't quite so obnoxious. But Buddhahood would be totally impossible. Yeah? And where does that leave us? Yeah? That leaves us with the kind of depression and anxiety that people have nowadays, I think. Yeah? Feeling, what's the use? Okay, we are not inherently selfish. The above verse instructs us to pinpoint the self-centered thought and the self-grasping ignorance and give them all of our problems. Okay, so you want somebody or something to blame for your problems, you blame your own ignorance, you blame your own self-centered thought. And remember, these two things are not inherently part of us. So we don't blame ourselves. Since they are the source of our misery, it is suitable to do this. This is very different from masochistically wishing ourselves to suffer. Rather, wishing other living beings to be happy and wanting ourselves to be free from the reign of terror our self-grasping and self-centeredness inflict on us, we take on others' pain and give it to these two culprits. Okay, so we've identified properly who the culprits are. And then when we imagine taking on others' pain and suffering, it's not like it comes into us and it just sits there and makes us depressed and eats away at us. We give it to the self-centeredness, to the ignorance. Yeah. So usually we might imagine the self-centeredness and the ignorance as a hard lump at our heart. Yeah. Sometimes at the very beginning, when people aren't so used to it, when they still feel that their ignorance and their self-centeredness are really who they are, sometimes it's helpful. Make them into characters that you put beside you and give it to them like this, okay? Yeah, sometimes just thinking that you're taking all the pain and suffering into your own heart and then using that to destroy the ignorance and self-centeredness in your own heart. Sometimes that's a little bit too much at the beginning. So you put it like this out here. It's very interesting. There's several Buddhist practices where you make offerings to spirits and harm doers. But when I do those practices, yes, there may be external beings like that, but the real things are my own ignorance and self-centeredness, my own afflictions. And so sometimes when I'm doing that, and you're supposed to imagine the spirits, and then you offer your body to them, part of the giving meditation, then I do, I make up little characters that are anthropomorphized illustrations of what my afflictions would look like. Okay? So there's a self-centered one, not a self-centered one, the self-pity one. Okay? Anybody here throw pity parties for themselves? Yeah. Yeah, I'm expert at pity parties. If you ever need a pity party, ask me. I won't even tell you how to throw it. I'll throw it for you. Yeah, feeling sorry for myself. I'm very good at that. Yeah. So I'll make up a little character that is my self-pity mind. Okay. So I'll tell you what she looks like. She has a round face and big sad eyes and a really frilly lace, like RGB. Like RGB used to wear. Yeah, except hers is really thick, almost verging like Elizabeth I. Those pictures of Elizabeth I. And she has big eyes and this frilly thing, and she just looks like, okay. And then when they say, there's some practices you do where you imagine taking your body and transforming it into blissful wisdom nectar and offering it to your demons. So she's my demon. And I give her this incredibly delicious, blissful wisdom nectar, and she just takes it. She goes, "Is this for me? Oh!" And she guzzles it all down, and then she just feels so happy afterwards. Yeah, and she's relaxed, and she can look at other people and smile. Yeah. So that's my personal addition onto the Cho practice. But, but I find that, I think that goes along with what the practice is doing. Yeah. Because I could imagine a monster, but for me, that self-pity mind doesn't appear like a monster with fangs. It's, it's self-pity in how can you resist it? It's this little girl who's afraid with her little frilly, thing. Yeah. So you've got to feel sorry for her. Yeah. And then you feed her this blissful wisdom nectar, which is a transformation of your own flesh and blood gooey body. And then she's happy. It's like I was just talking yesterday about that film I saw when I was, and that person's getting afraid, and I thought, just turn around and talk to the skeleton. So it's the same idea. Yeah, talk to the skeleton. Make an offering to this, the self-pity part of you. I'll give you another illustration. Okay. Sometimes I tell too many stories, but anyway, I think stories are good. Yeah, they illustrate like how you do things. So I was co-organizer of an event in Bodh Gaya in 1996. And the event had, 100 and something people, maybe 200 people. And I was co-organizing it with another nun, okay? This other nun, she was very nice, but she was the person, that sometimes other people would come to you and say, she's been ordained for a really long time, but she has such a problem with anger. What's the story? And you would respond with, well, you should have known her before she met the Dharma. Yeah? So she was that kind of person, yeah. Inherently, yeah. No, actually, she had many different sides to her, but that was one side. And the thing was, when you ordain, you sit in ordination order. So we sat next to each other. So we're co-organizing this event. We're not getting along, and she sits next to me. Of course, my sitting next to her, I'm sure that doesn't disturb her mind at all, because I'm such a nice person and so cooperative throughout all of this. Okay. So what I did is, because in Buddhism, we have this thing of offering tormas. So a torma is like a cake, some super delicious, cake. And sometimes you offer it to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Sometimes you offer a torma, this kind of delicious cake, to different spirits or malevolent beings. So I said to myself, well, I'm going to start giving torma offerings to her. That doesn't mean I'm going to go, with the hand mudras and the mantra, It means that I would, get a chocolate bar. I would get something that I knew she'd like, and I would give it to her, and as much as I could, I'd just give her some little gift or say something nice. And I did this as I gave myself the assignment to do this. Yeah. That every day you're going to either give her a gift or say something nice. Yeah. And I held myself to do that. And it was amazing what happened, we started getting along better. Yeah, isn't that shocking? Yeah. But just you make some small gift, you show some small kindness to somebody who you're not getting along with. And then, we made it to the end of the course, and we actually rejoiced at the end. Yeah, because it had turned out quite well. So, questions, comments?
Someone online is asking, on page 37, the fourth paragraph down, there's the sentence, "This is the mere I, the conventionally existent I that attains awakening."
Mm-hmm.
She says, is the reference to the conventional I here to reinforce the point that there is no inherently existent I, or is there more?
You mentioned that the conventionally existent I, because that is something that exists. Yeah? We exist now, we practice the path, we will attain awakening. That I exists. Yeah? Some reified I, the one that's independent, that picks itself up by its own bootstraps. Yeah, that I doesn't exist. Yeah, but mentioning the conventional I here is so that people realize that when the Buddha said there's no self, he meant no inherently existent self. He didn't mean that there's no people at all. Yeah, because we use the word I, don't we? Yeah, we use the word I. So the word I is a convention. It refers to the conventionally existent self. Yeah, because we say, I did this, I did that, I thought this, I felt that. Yeah, so there's a person that exists. When the Buddha said no self, he wasn't talking about that person. He was talking about I exist. You know, that really strong feeling of I.
When I'm doing the 4 opponent powers, and I make a commitment to not do whatever I did, I will frequently end that with, I will make this commitment to the Buddha, to His Holiness, and to my teacher. And I do that, when I do that, I find that it prevents me from rationalizing before whatever period of time is up. I'm doing that on my own. I don't recall reading that anywhere that would be a way to do it.
Yeah, but that's a beautiful way to do it. And that gives you more inner strength and more confidence. Yeah, because you made that pledge, you know, to the people that you respect, and you value your word.
Yes.
Yeah, and you want to keep your word. So that's something very good.
Thank you.
Yeah.